To welcome all of you to the talk on medicine and particularly about how we teach our students and how we choose our students, as I know those are the two things that you're particularly interested at this stage in your year, and particularly for our students just starting their last year of A-levels and finalising their choices on their UCAS forms. So my name's Enos and my surname's Cook. I look after admissions and recruitment for medicine at Queen's here in Belfast. I just want to remind you before I go on that Belfast is actually considered a fantastic place to start your way in the world. It's described as such in the Times University Guide. The talk itself is a little bit about the career, but mainly, as I said, about how you're going to choose where you want to study, and how you're going to be taught when you're at your medical school, and also the requirements that we have for those who are applying. It's easy to remind you at this stage, or very important to remind you at this stage, about how a medical degree just opens up a Pandora's box of the different types of doctor that you can be. And whether it's that you want to be in general practice, in primary care, in secondary care, or in a tertiary unit, such as the hospitals in Belfast city centre itself. The NHS has been particularly shown in the news in the last year in a very positive manner. And so I know that a lot of you will, whilst you've had difficulty perhaps getting the type of work experience that you normally thought you would, you equally have seen many of the stories of people who work in the NHS on television and on our news on a daily basis. At this stage, a lot of you will have already written your personal statement, but some of you are still thinking how you're going to demonstrate in it how you would be a good doctor and why. And it's not a cliche to say that you want to do medicine to help people. But for many, it's also about the satisfaction of explaining medical problems to patients and reassuring them. Within a very short time, you have to build up a relationship with people and often help them to make decisions about their own management and their own treatment. There are three useful websites that you perhaps have already discovered, but the Medical Schools Council, the BMA, studying medicine and becoming a doctor, and the GMC itself have very useful insight into what makes a good doctor. Most of them will list a variety of traits, and some of them are signposted to you here. These are personal traits and characteristics that you already have within you. And when you come to medical school, we will be honing your experience as a team worker. We will help you with your motivation and learning as a self-directed learner. But what we will particularly be doing is helping you develop your clinical competence. And that's what a medical school is doing, is ensuring that you go out as a confident and competent foundation doctor. So why choose Queen's to start your medical career? There are many things that are perhaps important to you as an individual when you decide in which medical school you want to choose. This can be everything from the reputation the medical school has to the cost of living in the area that you're going to live in. And all of these are actually important for you as choosing a place where you're going to be living and working for 5 years. However, I think particularly important is the method of teaching. Will you enjoy learning in the environment that's been provided for you and in the way it's been provided? Also, the size of the school. Is it a medium school or a very large school or a very small school? And likewise, the area it serves. And a lot of insight can be developed from talking to the student population who are studying here already, and make use of your time to phone in with questions for our students over these 3 days. So you know that about the university itself was founded in 1845, but you may not know that the medical school is actually 10 years older than that. and was here before a university was established. Whilst the medical school started in 1835, it was actually even in the 1880s that it had women studying for medicine, earlier than many places. It's one of the Russell Group, as you know, and it has, over these last decade, it's won many prizes, particularly it's the Queen's Anniversary Prize it's proud of. It was the 8th most research-intensive university in the last REF review. It's actually second in the UK for university facilities. Now that's all of the things that make life at the university good for you as a student. It's everything from the teaching facilities through to the accommodation, the Wi-Fi, etc., that make being a student easier and more enjoyable. I'll come back to the student survey, but for the last 8 years, we have been in the top 5th and 6th, really, in the amongst the UK medical schools for student satisfaction. And in this last year of 2019, we were 4th for satisfaction. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Over the last 2 decades, there's been over 700 million invested in the university itself. And this has made a vast change in the facilities that are available. You will see pictures, I'm sure, of the new library, where 10,000 students a day make use of it. And our medical students in particular make use of a lot of the small group teaching rooms in it for their teamwork. But within the medical school itself, we have the Health Sciences building, and more recently the Cancer Centre and the Wellcome Centre, all research centres. Whilst new buildings are fantastic for teaching, what's important to you are the people that those centres and that investment has brought in. People from all over the world who now want to work here and continue the research here. They're passionate about what they do, and they bring that enthusiasm across to you when they're teaching you in the medical school. You may have seen on the BBC, they announced last year the 100 best breakthroughs of significant impact on everyday lives. One of those people that was highlighted was Frank Pantridge. Now, each of you in your school has a little yellow box like this, a defibrillator, which has made the difference to many lives over the last decades. Professor Pantridge actually developed the first defibrillator mobile defibrillator in 1965. But by 3 years later, he had the first defibrillator out in ambulances in Belfast. And as you can see, there was this vast difference from 70 kilos to 3 kilos. He didn't just stay in Northern Ireland and see how he could develop things here. He actually linked in with NASA because what he needed was a battery. This 70 kilos was simply this all battery. He needed something that was very small and very portable. And at that stage in the 60s, NASA was the place that was developing these tiny batteries for going up in space. And as I said, within 3 years, he developed it for the Belfast ambulances. And now you see it in every public building, the mobile defibrillator. One of the areas that Queen's is particularly interested in at the minute is personalised medicine, not only in cancer, but across the whole of medicine. To think of it more that one size doesn't fit all, and that there should be this major shift towards precision medicine. Not only that, it's a continually flexible medical school. And within weeks, it was at the forefront of research in COVID during the most recent pandemic. So why medicine at Queen's? Well, just to remind you some of the facts about the medical school. The medical school has 262 students in each year. 236 of those are for our home and EU students, and 26 are for international students. So that makes us a very medium-sized medical school, a medical school where within the year you can get to know the other people in your class. It's a 5-year course, and it is A100 when you're looking at the UCAS codes. Our aim is to develop you with the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that will make a good foundation doctor. Because don't forget, as a doctor, you're going to be learning throughout your careers. To summarize the curriculum strategy, we have a systems-based approach in the first 2 years, but we introduce clinical right from the beginning of year 1. I'll come back to that in a moment. We have case-based learning integrated throughout, and progress testing to help you with your understanding that you are keeping up with your colleagues all through each year. There are 4 key topics or themes that run through our medical course. They are running through every year and every module in that year. We want to send you out as not just a practitioner for here in Northern Ireland, but a practitioner that can work anywhere in the world. But we also want to send you out interested in prevention of ill health as well as managing illness. We want you to have a very good background in the science, the core science, so that when you are learning about new things as you go through your medical career, that you actually have that science underpinning and that you can quickly assimilate anything new that you have to take on board. We need you to be good in medical practice, and what we mean is good at all the practical skills that you need, and to develop that as you go through in your 5 years. We also want you to be able to work in a team. A lot of what goes wrong in the health service is because a team didn't work together and gel together, and you'll see how we have an emphasis in that right from the beginning of day 1. These actually stand for the initials of G, C, AT, and you will know of as that as your DNA, or from DNA that you've learned about. And we counted the DNA of our course. As I said, those 4 themes go through every year and every module that you're doing within that year. Now, I know this is a busy slide, and I don't want you to try and read it from beginning to end at all. I do want it to show that from when you come in day 1 until you leave after your finals in year 5, that there is a plan and a curriculum that sets out through every year and shows you, that takes you through everything that you will need to have learned to be that foundation doctor. We divide our course into 5 years, as I said. Years 1 and 2 are called our foundations of practice. Year 3 and 4 is where we immerse you in practice, and year 5 is all about preparing you for practice. I mentioned before progress testing, and you can see from the brown marks here and here and here how we have progress testing throughout each year, where you learn for yourself and where we are able to see how you were keeping up with the work as you go along. One of the things when you come to medical school that is very difficult is that it's the first time that you've not been a class of 10 or 20 and been able to see how your colleagues are working around you. This progress testing helps you see that you are managing to learn the right things and assimilate it as you go along. So let's go back to the years in a little bit more detail. So years 1 and 2 are foundation of practice. We actually start year 1 with what we call our core concepts teaching you the simple things of anatomy, physiology, etc., that will actually help you learn those subjects better once you start them in full force later on. We talk a little bit about what it is to be a doctor and to be a professional. We actually get you out on your family attachment from the beginning. Many medical students come to medicine and haven't had to deal with anybody who's been sick in their family or with illness in their family. And so we think it's important that you learn what it's like to have a chronic illness in the family and how that affects everybody within it. To see the NHS from the other side, in other words, to see it from the side of the patient and the patient's relative. And at the same time, we start your clinical skills from the very beginning as well. So after this introductory course, we move on to the semester real, if you like. And we teach you in systems to begin with. So that means that when you're learning about the heart, you're not only learning about it in physiology, but you're doing the anatomy, the biochemistry, and the pharmacology that's important at the same time. All of our teaching is underpinned by case-based learning. So that means that, for example, when you're learning about the respiratory system, you may be going through a case of a child with asthma. Now, you haven't learned about pediatrics at this stage, but you can use everything that you've learned in your core lectures, your practical skills, your practical classes to help you diagnose and manage that particular case that we've given you about asthma. Each case lasts for 2 weeks, and I'll come back to case-based learning in a moment. At the same time as doing your respiratory here, you'll actually be learning how to examine the chest as well. And over year 1 and year 2, you were brought out to general practice to learn how to do those examinations on real patients, as well as in our clinical skills unit. And by the end of second year, you'll have been brought out as well to learn how to make the most of our teaching in hospitals. So we bring you out in groups so that you get used to being on the wards, understanding how to behave around patients on a ward setting, and how to make the most of your learning opportunities when you're on the ward as well. This is the anatomy centre where you'd have your anatomy taught to you. We have whole body dissection. We're privileged to still have this available, and we're one of the few medical schools in the UK that can still provide it. But we provide it in a very state-of-the-art, if you like, anatomy centre. And this means that if a group is perhaps dissecting the shoulder on a patient here, and they see a particularly unusual setup of blood vessels or anatomy of that shoulder, the teacher can actually pull a camera down and show that what's happening in that corner of the room to the rest of the class, so that very quickly everybody gets the same experience and the same opportunity in a way that they couldn't before when there wasn't this technology in place. It means now that our anatomy centre is actually used by other societies and surgical societies who come back to teach their postgraduates in the facility. This is an example of our clinical skills, okay? So we use our simulated patients from the very beginning. And this means that, for example, when you're learning to feel the abdomen, you're not just learning it on a plastic module, but you're learning how you have to interact with the patient during that same examination, so that you're getting those key communication skills from the very beginning. I've mentioned case-based learning before. So from the very beginning, our students are in groups of 8 to 10. And when you are doing your systems from year 1, you will also be doing cases. Each case lasts for 2 weeks. And as a group, you meet and learn how to use the core knowledge that's in your lectures and practicals to answer that case. The key thing here, it's very different from problem-based. In problem-based, you're given perhaps the same story, but you have to go and decide what depth you learn it in and where you find that information. With case-based learning, the core knowledge and information is taught to you during the lectures that you're doing at the same time. But you, as a team, learn to interact and bring that information together to answer the case as best you can. At the end of each case, then the whole year is brought together and you're given an overview of what you should have managed to take away from that case. These case-based learning sessions will be flowing all the way through each year, and they'll just change in variety. But in the first years, what you're learning to do is think ahead to clinical cases in the future and work together as a team. Third year, I said, is where you start immersion in practice. And during third year, you're now out in hospitals for the majority of your time. You spend 2 14-week attachments, 1 in medicine and all the specialties that go with it, and 1 in surgery with all the specialties that go with it. You also, during this year, will spend half your time in the teaching hospitals and half your time in the district general. Because in the teaching hospitals, you might see the unusual and interesting, which is always fantastic to learn. But what's key for you as a junior doctor is that you also know the common and the frequent, and that you become confident with those. Hence, you'll spend half your time in each. So we're very lucky that we have the 10 hospitals that are all around Northern Ireland that are linked to Queen's, where you can develop that knowledge. During the time that you're out in these hospitals, you have your accommodation provided locally, and we have a system of e-learning to make sure that you're not continually having to come back to Belfast for lectures, but that your core knowledge is taught in these lectures and you can access it when you want. For example, you may be doing cardiology this September, but your friend isn't doing it till September and another friend isn't doing it until June. It means that you all have access to exactly the same core knowledge at the same when you need it. Our students love this because it means that they can keep going back to those lectures for revision, that they can stop and start them when they want. And the lectures themselves are provided, are not just somebody talking through slides or a set of PDF slides that you're left to deal with yourselves, but there's actually a live presenter on those lectures as well. Fourth year happens to be the one that I'm involved in, and we call it our cycle of life. And that's where you are learning about birth, about pediatrics, and right through to caring the elderly. And through all of that, we also have sessions on your mental health and well-being. So these are the 4 key areas that you're covering in this year. But we find it's important to not just learn how these people are looked after in hospital, but that you learn through general practice how they present and how they're looked after once they leave hospital. And that's why for each of these topics, you will be out in general practice as well. The last thing I want to mention about year 4 is to remind you about the case-based learning that's been going on throughout your medical student career. So at this stage, perhaps in women's health, which I happen to teach in, you might have a case with a couple with infertility. And it's an opportunity that you not only learn about the clinical items that you're and topics that you're learning about now, but you have to go back and revise the reproductive physiology that you learned in year 2. The key thing is that you're not just learning and forgetting, but that you are learning and developing each year on the areas that you concentrated on in the previous years. This is all very important because from 22-23, everybody who is graduating will be doing their medical licensing exam. And that's the GMC exam that every medical student has to complete. It's going to include basic science as well as clinical. And so we know that this way of learning that we have developed will help our students when it comes to that exam. Once students have finished 4th year, they immediately move into their elective. We're keen that people are able to experience medicine outside Northern Ireland. And so we still have a 6-week elective for our students. Now, some students will decide to stay here and there's a particular subject that they want to do. Others will decide that they want to learn about perhaps A&E and they've decided that South Africa is the best place to do that. Others maybe want to go to do research in public health and that they know that Harvard's a useful place for it. Others want to study medicine in altitude and go to Chile. And of course, there are other people who will do maybe general practice in India, general medicine in New Zealand, and even research in Melbourne. In other words, you choose the area you want to do your medicine in, and then the area you want to travel to. 5th year, then, is where we talk about our preparation for practice. And by preparation, we mean it is all geared to making sure that you are that confident foundation doctor. So you've come back from your elective. We do a lot of, you do clinical attachments again in medicine and surgery, and a specialty of interest to you. But we spend quite a bit of time on patient safety and preparation for practice. And our patient safety is about having drills and ensuring that you're able to deal with any of the emergencies that you may come across so that you feel confident. One of the ways that we do this is now that clinical skills area that I showed you with just one patient in it is set up as a ward. And so when you go into that ward in the morning, there will be simulated patients in every bed, just like an ordinary ward, and you will have a list of work that you have to do. But it teaches you things like prioritization, though, because when you go in, the day will not pan out as you think. Perhaps the lady in bed 2 has a seizure that you have to deal with, or the man in bed 3 has sepsis, and you have to change your priority of what you were planning to do and look after both of those cases. But it can teach you other things as well, because perhaps in bed 7, there are parents sitting with a child, and those parents are really very angry about the way they felt their child was treated. One of the things we do when we're worried is it comes out as anger. And it's a very safe place for our students to learn to deal with those difficult communication scenarios in a safe environment, where if it goes wrong, they can think why it went wrong and how they would do it again better in the future. So what are the things that our students like? Well, they appreciate a lot of the additional things that are available to them. Some of those are an integrated degree. About 80 to 100 of our students every year take a year out. But instead of doing it between 2nd and 3rd year, as happens in most medical schools, to do a BSc, they actually take it between 3rd and 4th year, where in the 1 year, they're able to do a master's. Now, we have 14 different masters that are available in Queen's itself, but students can go elsewhere if they find something that particularly interests them too. The ones that are very popular with us at the moment are obviously public health, global health, and anatomy. But if you have the interest and the computing skills, people will do things such as bioinformatics. We want you to enjoy that year and develop in a way that you feel you direct, or in a way or direction that you feel you'd like to at that stage. We have summer studentships that are available throughout the 4 years for people to do research in Queen's. Some of those students are actually paid studentships, but other ones students arrange for themselves. I mentioned the elective already, and student-assisted selected components, which are running through all of the years, and that's where people choose an area that's of particular interest to them. I happen to teach in one, for example, in women's global health in 3rd year. One of the things that our students particularly enjoy and say is so very useful to them when they go out as foundation doctors is that once they have done their clinical exams, they move into something called an assistantship, where they're actually working with foundation doctors on the wards and learning all those additional things about time management and prioritization that only come with experience. So that lasts for 9 weeks in our 5th year, and as I said, includes 2 weeks into specialty of interest, and it also includes some time in general practice. So there's things that they appreciate then, are particularly the cadaveric dissection, the whole body dissection. As I said, it's become something that is a highlight for our students, rather than something that may have been rote learning as it used to be in the past. They really like the clinical integration from year 1, but as I've tried to describe it to you, it's a gentle introduction through year 1 and year 2, so that it keeps you interested, but equally doesn't put you in on a ward on day 1, facing things that you haven't yet been prepared for. We use those 2 years to prepare you for things for the time in the ward. They really like that the core knowledge is taught throughout, that it's in your lectures and your practicals. They like the fact that we have personal tutors throughout. These are called your portfolio tutors. And we also have advisors of study for every year. So people that you can talk to that you're not necessarily actually being taught by at the time, and can discuss any worries or fears that you have as you're going through. They like the fact that we have so many hospitals where our students are the only ones in those hospitals. They like the timing of finals. I mentioned that the written paper is between 4th and 5th year. That means also that our clinical exams are then in the February time prior to people graduating in May. It means that, as I said, our students can move on to that assistantship that we've already talked about. And they like that in that last year, we make sure that they're prepared for the national exams that they have to do, whether those the prescribing exams or situational judgment. And they like that throughout we try to introduce them to interprofessional teams and how they work as a team with the other healthcare workers on the ward to make sure that they have the best outcome for patients. At the very beginning, I mentioned the National Student Survey. So the National Student Survey occurs every year. It's where every final year is asked to give independent, so it's not the medical school collecting this information, independent information about how students felt about their course. And said overall for the 33 medical schools in the UK that had students graduating in 29, we were ranked 4th by our students. And while they not only said that they appreciated their teaching, their learning resources, and the organisation of the course, but perhaps we are particularly happy with the fact that they've ranked us 5th in the UK for feedback. As I said at the beginning, when you are in a class of 10 or 20, you have really good feedback from your teacher, but also from the people around you. You get to know whether you're doing enough work and whether you're keeping up with those around you. When you move into a medical school of a class of 236, it's obviously much more difficult to get that feeling, or are you keeping up with the work and doing what you need to be doing? And so we're particularly pleased that our students have ranked us so high for feedback. We really want our students to develop a work-life balance, and so many of you will make use of the great sports facilities that are in Queen's, or the other clubs and societies. You not only have the ones that are linked to medicine itself, so Paediatric Society, Surgical Society, Medicine Frontier Society, etc., but you have all of the other clubs and societies that are in the university to make use of. We know perhaps that for you as a group in particular, that it may be quite difficult coming into university. You'll have had the broken time in your AS level years, and you may well have broken studying time during this A level year as well. So we're conscious about the importance of support. I mentioned the personal tutors that we have for all our medical students, but there are also academic support in the university itself, and I'm sure you'll learn about that if you go on to any of the talks by student guidance given here. So that's why I think you should choose Queen's as a medical school. So how do we choose the students who come to us? The choice or the selection process has two particular stages. The first is choosing you on your cognitive skills. And the second then is choosing you on your non-cognitive skills. And those are tested through the multiple mini interviews that we have. And it's after the interviews that you're then ranked and given offers. So let's take those each in step. So your cognitive skills, I'm going to talk about the GCSEs first, and then later on I'll mention the other types of qualifications that you may be bringing. So we ask you to pick your 9 best GCSE subjects, and we score them as to whether it's an A star, A, B, or C. And you can very quickly add up your score. We say the best 9. We know that some of you will have the chance of 10 or 11, but there will be some of you who will not even have the chance to do 9. And I'd like those of you in the class to always contact us directly at admissions. We ask that you have chemistry, biology, physics, or maths, and maths at GCSE, and we do accept double award science. You don't have to have all 3 sciences separately at GCSE. We want you to remember, though, to check the minimum GCSE requirements that are the requirements for the university itself as well. You then look at your UCAT, okay? And once you've done the exam, you look at the score that comes from the 4 different sections of the UCAT. We band people and give them a point, up to 6 points for those who've scored the highest. I think it's very important that you look at this, because we're not a university that says everybody has to score over 2,500 and therefore have a strict cutoff at that point. Or we're not a university that starts at the top and just interviews those who are perhaps in the top decile or the top 2 deciles. We believe that it's important that there's a balance between the UCAT score and the GCSE score. And some people will do less well in GCSE score and very well in their UCAT, and others will have done better in the UCAT and less well in the GCSE score. So out of that, you add the 2 scores together. So the maximum you can get for your GCSEs are 36. The maximum you can get for the UCAT, that should say, is 6. And therefore the total maximum points are 42. And we simply then go down a ranking from 42 to offer interviews. This shows who has been given interviews over the last 8 years. And you can see that for 2020, we interviewed everybody on 30 points and above. Clearly, there was a difference between 15, 16 and here. At that point, it was obvious that there were very high scores needed to get an interview, and we made an effort to interview more people to ensure that we could drop the GCSE requirement in particular. So this is how we choose the people that come for interview. So when you come for interview, we're testing your non-cognitive skills. Now, there are other ways that we could look at this, okay? One is their situational judgment. I want to highlight that Queen's does not block people from interview if they've done less well on their situational judgment. But we know, like other medical schools, that perhaps the people who score better in the situational judgment may well do better at interview. So the other ways that we could look at non-cognitive skills are your reference. And clearly that's where a teacher from your school or your headmistress or headmaster talks a little bit about your character, supports your reason for wanting to do medicine and your suitability for the course. For us, it's also very important that if there's anything that's gone wrong at school in the last number of years, it's important that they highlight it there. So we want to see that your reference was satisfactory. We also want to see that your personal statement states explicitly that you want to do medicine, okay? So that you've shown some commitment and motivation. Now, within that, we understand how difficult it is to get work experience in hospitals. And so we just look for work experience anywhere in the caring sector. So it can be observation in clinical settings, it can be voluntary work in care settings, it could be that you're actually doing paid work at the weekends in care homes. And it could be any attendance you've had at school conferences or even talks like today. I do want to emphasize that we do not score your personal statement in any way. But we understand that you are writing it in a way that's demonstrating your suitability for medicine. And so it may discuss some of these areas and how you've demonstrated it through things that you've done already in school. Perhaps you've been in the school choir and showing how important that is as a team worker. Perhaps you're a prefect or a mentor in school and been demonstrating your confidence, how you can be empathetic to others, how you can be confidential to any information that they have taught you. But really the way that we test your non-cognitive skills are through your MMIs. And Queen's has been doing these since 2009. So we're one of the longest universities to actually have introduced MMIs into our selection process. We interview at least 600 candidates each year. We look for 4 key areas. And if you look at our website for MMI, just put MMI into the search machine in Queen's, you'll come up with a website that has all of this information. So moral reasoning, can you identify a problem and reason around it? See it from both sides. Communication, clear communication, but also can you listen and show your non-verbal skills? Empathy, understand and imaginatively enter into somebody else's way of thinking, okay? Put yourself in somebody else's shoes as a way of thinking of that. And lastly, problem solving. Can you see a problem and pose solutions to that problem so that you're analytical and you're logical in your way you approach something, particularly questions that you're perhaps not expecting until that moment they're presented. So as I said, we've been doing this since 2009. It's important because all candidates undertake the same task, so they're all being marked on the same scheme. And an interviewer, when they meet you on that day, will have seen quite a lot of candidates do the same question. So they have a very good feel of what is a good answer or an average answer or maybe a not so good answer on that particular topic. And that's why it reduces interviewer bias and variability and is a more reliable way of ranking people after the interviews. On the day, you're met by multiple different interviewers. So it's not 1 or 2 people who are making a decision on you, but with us, it's 9 different people that will have met you and graded you on the day. And it also means that we can sample you in different contexts. We use role players as well as a direct questioning. It allows us to rank people, and as I said, has a high reliability in that ranking. And from 2016, it was said to be the gold standard of choice for by the Medical School Council, and that's why you now see it introduced by most medical schools that you are applying to. Our particular MMIs have 9 stations. You have 1 minute to read outside and 5 minutes in the station. As I said, we have some that are direct questions and scenarios and others that have role players. The interviews tended to happen in January and March, but they obviously may have to be in a different format this coming year. So after the interviews, you are then ranked from 1 to whatever is the final number that we interview. And the offers that we give out are based on that ranking. The offer that the conditions you then have to meet are based on the A levels that you're studying. And we have 3 different options of offers that we give people. Some people are doing an AS level as well as 3 A levels. And so we ask that they have 3 A's and an A, and that the A includes either must include chemistry and then 1 other science. So that could be biology or maths or physics. But if it's not biology, we ask that you have the biology at the AS level. Some people are studying 3 A levels alone. And so we ask that it's 1 A star and 2 A's. Again, we ask that you have chemistry and biology amongst your A levels if you're in that group. But please don't worry, it's not an A star in chemistry that we're asking for. It's in any of the 3 subjects. The final option is again A star and 2 A's that includes chemistry and another science, but we ask that you have at least a B then in AS biology if you haven't had it at the A level. So many of the students who come to us and then get an offer actually get 2 of these as options, and they can decide which of the one they will meet. Important points are that we don't include general studies as an A level, and we only include 1 maths A level. So if you're doing maths and further maths, you may want to include 1 of those as your A level and 1 as the AS, for example. We also do accept applied A levels, but only 1 applied A level or AS level. So the application process, therefore, is a 2-stage process. First of all, we rank you based on your cognitive skills, and that includes the GCSEs that you already have and the UCAT score that you have by the time you've applied to us. Then we interview you through our multiple mini interviews, and after the offer is based on your ranking after the MMI interviews. Now, I know some of you are doing other subjects as well, but just before I come to them, I want to remind you that you'll find all of this information on our course finder on how to apply to medicine on the Queen's website. And you'll also find some useful information, as I mentioned, on the other 3 websites that Medical School Council, GMC and BMA. But particularly for our requirements, please look at the Queen's website. And lastly, to find out about the MMIs themselves, just put in MMI onto the search machine, and it will bring up not only information about what we test on the day, but some example videos as well. Just to remind you about other subjects, some of you are doing Leaving Cert, and this is how we score for the 9 best Leaving Cert to bring Leaving Certificate. So to bring you to interview, and then the Leaving Certificate offer is H1 in chemistry and biology, and then another H1 and H2 at higher level. For those of you who are applying using your Scottish examinations, you add your UCAT score to your scores that you get for your hires that you already have, and then the offer of on your advanced hires depends on what you are already holding at the higher level. Some of you will actually be applying post A level. Now, the important thing for us is that you have applied to it. If you've applied to medicine before, that you actually included us as one of those choices. If you did that and you applied to Queen's and were interviewed and held an offer or a play, but then dropped a grade, we're very happy that you reapply again, okay? It does mean that you have to take your UCAT again, and if your combined score meets the cognitive threshold for that year, then you come for your MMI again. There's another group who apply to us and their UCAT GCSE score means that they don't get an interview or an offer. And for that group, provided your A levels now are good enough to meet the conditions that you need to actually get in, again, we're very happy that you apply a second time. We know that some people develop from GCSEs to the A levels and that they are scoring much better when they come to the A levels. So those in details are important, and they're on our How We Choose our students document on the Queen's website. The difficulty is that if you haven't applied to us the first time and you're applying on a repeat occasion, that we're not able to offer this opportunity. We also have lots of people who start a degree and decide to apply to medicine during that degree. Again, they have to do their UCAT, they have to apply through UCAS, and if they do well enough, come to their MMIs, but they must have the right science A levels at the right grade before they can do that. And the last group I want to mention are those who are applying as postgraduate applications, of which is quite a large group who do this each year. If you have a 2-1 in your primary degree, you must have A, B, B at A level or equivalent at the first attempt at those A levels. And if you don't have science amongst those A levels, then your entry requirement or conditions will include whatever grade you need in the science A levels. The graduates must still do the UCAT, and they must come for interview if they've scored well enough between the UCAT and the 36 points they get for their degree. So that's how we choose our students. I hope the information in it is what you needed. I hope the information at the beginning encouraged you to think of Queen's as the medical school you'd like to apply to. I want to thank you for listening to the talk that as I've been going through it. And I really want you to encourage you that if you have any questions at all from this, please ask them. and we are answering questions every afternoon through the 3 days of the Open Festival. At those talks, at those question times, we'll have students with us as well as myself and some colleagues. So it is an opportunity to talk to students as well about what it's like to study here. So thank you very much for listening.